Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox Reviews, and the weekend is upon us. That means watches. Everything you see here on the table is for sale. Names, references, and prices in the description. If you don't see the price, email me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. The purchase and pricing inquiry email line from you to me and my hand-picked crew. Only 3 of these watches don't have pricing as of today. Nevertheless, everything is available. Let's jump straight into an epic machine. A Grail watch by any definition and a Baselworld 2018 release. This is the Patek Philippe 5270-1R Perpetual Calendar Chronograph, 41 millimeters in red gold, not pink, not rose, red gold, with a black lacquer dial of extraordinary gleam and gloss, tachymeter scale outboard, applique rose gold indices, and note the use of black discs for the day as well as the month, giving the watch a cool black and red two-tone effect. Now you can see here the lugs have been stepped out rather dramatically, a little bit perhaps of a nod to the old 1579 chronograph. The case is surprisingly nuanced with character lines, curves, and creases both rife throughout. You'll also note the use of through fittings in the end links of the bracelet, so you can set the perpetual calendar through the bracelet end links. Now throw in this one on the wrist, you can see it sits nice and low, flat, manual wind, and compact, yet broad and imposing across the wrist. Thanks to the integrated end links in the bracelet, it has more presence than the standard 5270, both for its full bracelet and its red gold. This is a titan amongst timers. Now turning the watch over, I'll do my best here, and Harrison's a champ with this sort of thing, but you can see the caliber 29-535. Let's see if we can get even a little bit closer to the camera here. Column wheel, lateral clutch, instantaneous jumping minutes, 65-hour power reserve, 6 position, not 5, 6 position adjustment, handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring, free-sprung gyromax balance, and a fully jeweled lateral clutch. Now, jumping back to the operation of the chronograph system, I'm going to show you that you could see the operation of the levers, you could see the motion of the clutch, and you can feel the rifle bolt-like action of the column wheel, which is capped and black polished. This is truly as good as it gets, and you'll note that the bracelet, rather elegant, small individual links and plenty of gaps between them, making this almost an ideal companion if you want to wear your perpetual calendar chronograph in tropical climes. The wrist easily venting through these many individual apertures, neither inclined to pinch skin nor pull hair. And of course the timepiece solid and stable on the wrist with a double deployant clasp to prevent droppage while donning or removing. That is about as good an opener as I have ever offered, and we have recently featured a Grubel 4C as an opener. That said, for some, there is no substitute for a cool combination of rosy tones and stainless steel. So if you want to mix and match, let's take 2 different watches that otherwise have nothing in common besides their sleek, someone might even say somewhat sinister, two-tone mogul aesthetic. Now you can see right here we have a combination of the CHNR, the 126711 CHNR, two-tone, red gold, and 904L stainless steel GMT-Master from last year, 70-hour, it's got the 3-day power reserve, it has the double time zones, it has the ceramic in black and a sort of mud brown. It's a reddish brown like Georgia clay on the Serichrome bezel. And then we have another 2018 launch. This is the Oris Divers 65 bronze and steel. Now, regardless of your price point, whether it's nearly $20,000 or under $2,000, you're going to find the same basic look, feel, and attitude. Now, let's take a look at each one on the wrist, because though they are both 40 millimeters, they wear a world of difference on the wrist. Throw in the CHNR on, you can see that it's a wonderful way to blend Rolex's classic two-tone with a more modern aesthetic, as rose gold really is the colored gold of our time. It's a little bit younger, it's a little bit warmer, it's a little bit hipper, it's not tied to the somewhat stigmatized yellow gold steel two-tone of the 80s and 90s. With the combination of the rose gold crown, the rose gold applique on the dial, as well as the rose gold hands and the center links of the bracelet, this is a nicely balanced design that's broad and prominent. It does wear like a 42 in terms of its size, size, but you'll note that it's not excessively thick, and this is probably the biggest difference between Tudor and Rolex. Rolex keeps its watches thin, and at 100 meters water resistant, this dual-time pilot's watch is ideal for any adventure that comes to mind, above the waves, atop, or below. Now let's throw the Oris on the wrist and take a look at how that one wears. Also a 40, it's designed to evoke a watch made in 1965, which is to say right out of the gate, it's going to have a slender mid-case profile. Slender mid-case profiles, you'll see them on some of the more true-to-history Navitimers like the 1959 or the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch, but those narrow case bands evoke history as they were pretty much the default style for the 50s and 60s. You have that narrow case band, you have a dramatically cambered sapphire that's almost like a vintage plexiglass in its off-axis distortion. The dial is a lovely and lustrous lacquer blue. I'm not sure how well that plays on the camera, but it's evident and striking in person. Big crown, no guard profile. Again, true to vintage history, this watch has bronze rather than red gold. Bronze on the bezel insert, bronze on the center links, and as you can see, the indices in the hands have also been colored accordingly to mirror those tones, a combination of silver, bronze, and blue. It is striking in a way that, frankly, even the Rolex isn't. It's the addition of that blue lacquer dial that makes the difference. Now you can see, a little bit like Tudor, we have a simulated rivet-style bracelet, and then we have a clasp, which is actually impressive in that the swing arm itself is milled rather than stamped, and then it uses a twin trigger closure system rather than a cheap friction fit or clamshell. This is actually what I'd like to see on watches costing considerably more. Oris does things the right way. Inside the case, a tough timekeeper, Sellita SW200. 38-hour power reserve, automatic wind, quick set with hacking seconds, and the timepiece, water resistant down to 100 meters with a unidirectional bezel. I'm going to let you hear the bezel action against the mic. Reminds me of Seiko and Blancpain. It's a little bit creamy. The detents are distinct, but at the same time, there's a refinement there that I did not expect in a sub-$2,000 pre-owned watch. Now, jumping to another one of our Rolex cohort, you can see that this is the watch I'm shocked to find my colleague Brandon tells me I have never reviewed on Watchbox Review. This is the 2011 to present 42mm Rolex Explorer II 216570. This is the one that's sometimes called the Steve McQueen reissue on the basis of its admittedly cloaked orange arrow. And I will bring that out to play, as well as the lateral satin finishing, the radial satin finishing laid down with a lapping machine that emanates from an imaginary center point at the center of the dial. That radially satin brushed bezel is evocative of the original 1971 1655, the original orange arrow. You can see that the dial is larger and less crowded. The Cyclops eye doesn't dominate the dial on a 42 the way it does on a 40 or smaller. The watch is also wonderfully slender as it measures only about 12.2 millimeters thick, but 42 millimeters across. It's broad and it's flat, giving it an elegance by virtue of its aspect ratio that you don't get on the GMTs and the Submariners in the 40 millimeter case. A true dual time, and it uses a unique movement, the 3187, that features Rolex's in-house Paraflex shock protection system, as well as a larger date wheel, making this a movement only ever used in this one model. 100 meters water resistant, just like the GMT. It is suitable for just about any adventure that may come to mind, but it's a bit more muted. As you can see, the center links of this one being satin finished rather than polished, and you can see the satin finished center continues down the center of the clasp. It's designed to be a little bit more discreet, and because of the lack of a rotating bezel, this is also an excellent companion for dress attire. The black dial with the white gold indices and hands really compounding that advantage. So if you want to go black tie with a Rolex, this might be one of the best options, particularly because of the elegance of the broad and flat aesthetic. Sticking with our Rolex watches, but simplifying, we saw the GMT-Master II, but of course there was a GMT-Master, and this is the 16700, all black. This is a 1991 production N series. It has the desirable 16700 all black bidirectional rotating GMT bezel. Now the timepiece was launched in 1988 as the last of the original GMT Masters. The first was the 6542, the so-called Pussy Galore, launched in late 1954, and the idea from the beginning, when it was designed for Pan Am pilots, was that you would set the watch to Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. You would then use the local airport or port GMT offset in conjunction with the rotating bezel to temporarily judge 2 time zones on the dial, and you can still use it as such. Of course, this being a modern era Rolex, we have a lacquer dial with white gold hands and indices. You get all the modern standards: sapphire crystal, chronometer certified, 100-meter water resistance, 40-millimeter case, white gold indices and hands, and it should be mentioned, this was the last of the GMT Masters to feature a standard quickset for the date. Throw it on the wrist, it's an elegant looking piece, comfortable, graceful, equipped with the Oyster 3-link bracelet. This one's sportier than it would appear on the Jubilee, and one might even say it looks more classically Rolex, as with the monotone bezel, it has almost the look of a Rolex dive watch on the wrist. If you want to pare down, simplify, and minimize, as Mies van der Rohe once said, less is more, and that's certainly the case with this GMT Master with full black bezel. But we can get simpler still. A watch that is somewhat deceptively and incorrectly called the no date. This is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Submariner 14060. Now this is a watch that was built right up until the modern era. It wasn't replaced until the year 2012 when the 6-digit arrived, but this is a timepiece that hails from the last of the line, as it features a chronometer certified caliber. After 2006, the basic 14060 featured a chronometer certified movement, meaning that in terms of its technical chops, it was just as accomplished as the 5-digit with a date. So you have the chronometer certification, the no date dial, white gold hands, indices, black lacquer base. You still get the 300-meter water resistance, and as you can see internally, you get the flip lock as well as the dive extension built right in. And on the wrist, the pre-super case sub is quite simply marvelous, comfortable, compact, flat, basic. It's a watch that harks back to the earliest days of the Submariner back in 1953 with the 6200s, the 6204s, and the 6205s, meaning that this is a timepiece in every regard that is equal to the legend of the Sub, clean, clear, uncluttered, and as elemental as a Rolex watch gets. It even has that nostalgic Rolex rattle in the bracelet thanks to the hollow center links and the hollow end links. In other words, if you want to wear a modern era watch, and this one being a G serial number is a 2010, but you want the feel and look of a vintage Rolex, this is both vintage feel and heritage, but with modern materials, fit, finish, and a relatively short history that entails little, if any, refinishing. That is the way to go. That said, I fell in love with the Rolex Submariner during the 90s, but for my graduation in the early 2000s, the watch I ultimately owned was the Omega Seamaster, the Diver 300 meter, and this is a dial that took my breath away back in those formative days when I was beginning to shape my preferences and realizing that there was more to the watch world than Rolex. This is the ultimate way to give your high horology watches a rest without slumming it a la G-Shock or Timex Ironman. This is the Quartz Seamaster Diver 300 meter. Still a Seamaster Professional, 300 meters, helium escape valve, a luxury caliber designed to last the life of the owner and the life of the watch. Big, broad, maxi-style dial. This is the dial that launched in 1998 with the Seamaster 300 meter GMT, so it's bigger and bolder and brighter at night than the traditional skeleton hand Bond with the round indices. You have a polished bezel, unidirectional rotating with blue lacquer inlays and an absolutely explosive metallic lacquered, it's metallic underneath and lacquered on top, iridescent blue electric dial, often called the electric dial by collectors. Now caliber 1538 is designed, as I mentioned, to be a luxury quartz caliber, meaning you're going to get precision between 10 and 15 seconds a month, and you also have the convenience of an hour stepping feature, just like on the caliber 8500s and the 9300 family of chronographs. So the 8500s and the 9300s feature this refinement, but the Quartz Diver 300 meters had it first. Quartz has its advantages. Precision is one. A 42-month battery life is another. Set it and forget it. And slender profile, only 11.3 millimeters thick. The watch still features the fold-out dive extension and the milled-out clasp with twin trigger release. You can see that there is a different bracelet here than on the standard Bond, as this is a 3-link design that's a bit burlier and sportier, particularly since the edges of the links themselves are squared off rather than rolled off as they are on the Bond. So this looks more like a sports bracelet and less like a dress bracelet. Throw it on the wrist and you can see how flat it wears. It's hard to imagine that there was ever such a flat and flush modern era Omega Seamaster, as the Planet Oceans and even the modern Diver 300 meters are now pushing 14 millimeters even in their thinnest form and almost 20 in their thickest. A watch that's broad and comfortable across the wrist with a solid end-link to end-link measurement of 53.5 millimeters. Though it's a 41.5 millimeter case, it wears larger and it is substantial. You feel it on the wrist and in the hand. This is a lot of watch. Continuing with our Swatch Group sports watch, underappreciated all-star roll call, we have the Breguet Type 20. This is a 3820 Ti. Now, these were launched in the late 1990s. This one was designed to evoke modern aeronautics, whereas the original Type 20 of 1954 was named after the Type 20 contract that incited several manufacturers, for example, Breguet, Auricos, Dodin, to produce these watches. Breguet, of course, the longest running and most notable. This watch is designed to evoke the modern era of aviation with carbon fiber on the dial and a titanium case. 39 millimeters, the watch features an automatic winding Lemania-based Flyback chronograph caliber, 48-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate. You've got a quick set date. See if I've wound this one enough to activate the chronograph. I'm going to wind this one up so we can. It is a caliber 582, which is the Breguet modification of the Lemania 1350, which many cite as the greatest cam lateral clutch chronograph caliber ever made. The 1340 and later the 1350 really are luxury horology movements that have a crisp action, sharp, whether you're engaging, starting, stopping, or activating the flyback. This is probably the best cam chronograph caliber ever made. It is crisp and you can hear it. I'm going to put it up against my microphone so you can hear how sharp that cam is. Don't let anyone ever tell you that a Coulisse chronograph is not as sharp as a column wheel. Now, of course, it's fun to play with a flyback because you reset and restart with one push of the trigger. The nice thing here is that you also have a watch that's 100 meters water resistant, so when you pop open the full titanium bracelet and clasp and throw this one on the wrist with the full titanium bracelet, and you can see it's narrow across the wrist, only about 46 millimeters lug to lug. This is an all-around sports watch, loomed, automatic, water resistant with a chronograph. Note the big eye style exaggerated chronograph minutes dial that makes that critical register easier to read against the other dial functions. You can see the case back of the watch is solid, but it is screwed in, endowing this pilot's watch with that 100-meter water resistance. And in titanium, it is almost weightless. This is feather light on the wrist with a bidirectional rotating aviator-style bezel. One of the crispest aviators bezel, by the way, the bidirectional, usually not nearly as crisp as unidirectional. Line it up with the minute hand, and you have two concurrent timing organs, the chronograph as well as the bezel. Listen to that bezel against the mic. That's a pilot's bezel. They are never that sharp. Now, a watch famed for its bezel, albeit not a mobile bezel, really defined by its bezel, the Royal Oak, and we featured a 15300 ST on the last show, this time a 15400. This is the model launched back in 2012, 41 millimeters in stainless steel, under 10 millimeters thick, with a black Grand Tapisserie dial cut on a pantograph lathe, which is a mimicry engine that takes a big pattern, and then it inscribes every small undulation of that hobnail template onto the dial. White gold hands, indices, and AP logo to avoid tarnishing over time. You can also see that there are white gold bolts perfectly arrayed around the perimeter. In the bezel, a rounded off octagon inspired by the Royal Navy warship that Gerald Genta cited as his muse, an octagonal porthole and a watch with a porthole bezel. The bracelet, 9 to 11 hours to finish these bracelets. This is a handmade watch inside and out, and the standard of fit finish will not disappoint. On the wrist, the timepiece feels as substantial as any Rolex. Although flat, it is broad, and you can see this is a 41 that wears more like a 42 or a 43. So I always tell people to size down a bit when wearing a Royal Oak or an Offshore. You want to think that if you're that 40, for example, 4 millimeter guy, you're probably going to wear this watch and agree that this wears pretty much like the watch you expect to be a 44 or a 43. It does feel that way. With a screw down crown and 50 meter water resistance, you can wear this one in the water. It is swimmable. Turn the watch over and you can see Audemars Piguet manufactured caliber 3120, 40 jewels with a 22 karat winding mass in the center. You can see the winding mass featuring the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet family, reminding you that AP is still run and owned by the founding families, the oldest Swiss manufacturer to be able to boast as much. You have a full balance bridge and a free sprung index for shock resistance, and a giant balance wheel that allows you to basically overcome the knocks on the wrist without deviation of timing. The large mass of the wheel making up for its slow beating 21.6 rate. Quick set as well as hacking seconds. That said, we're sort of running the table with sports watches, the Patek accepted. Let's talk about a dress watch, and a great one. Let's talk about a brand we rarely discuss, Glashutte Original. You can see a lovely guilloche sunray dial on the Senator Perpetual calendar, the sunray emanating from the image of the moon phase. You have aperture style calendar, easier to read than the rotary registers that Patek seems to love. This is a 40.1 millimeter case with platinum construction. You can see a lovely onyx cabochon on the platinum crown, and you can see on the wrist it's an easy watch to wear, being 40.1 millimeters. The Germans are very specific about this. It is 40.1 millimeters, not a tenth larger, not a tenth smaller, but the lug profile is short cropped and tightly downturned, meaning that even on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, you're going to wear this one well. A perpetual calendar, it need not be adjusted until the year 2100. Leap years, not a problem. And the Perpetual calendar day, February 29th, is upon us. You can see on the case back, caliber 100-02, 55-hour power reserve, high-grade finish, Glashütte stripes, 3/4 style bridge. You could see screws fixing golden chaton in place, the train wheel, or the train wheels, I should say, and their pivots fixed in place by those screw-fixed chaton. There is a black polished swan's neck regulator, and you can see there is a solar manual finishing, a double spiral of the reduction wheel for the winding system. This caliber 100 is Geo's premium automatic, and it goes into its flagship pieces. This is a truly graceful and gallant tilt at the finest from Switzerland. And I have to say, all things considered, right down to the subtlety of the double-stepped bezel, this is a credible effort and one of the watches that I would most desire to own on this table. A perpetual calendar from Saxony, from the old heartland, the German heartland of watchmaking, silversmithing, and glass blowing. And if you're wondering what that little dot at the center is, that is the AM/PM indicator. This watch, I should mention, also features a push-button flyback mechanism for recentering the seconds hand. Let's stick with our theme of unusual brands. This one's far less usual than any Swatch brand, including Jacques Drouot. Glashutte Original is as mainstream as it gets compared to Ressence. Designed in Antwerp, Belgium, and built in Switzerland, this is the Type 1R. R for Ruthenium. Now, it is a planetary display system, 105 parts and 15 jewels, a movement on top of a movement, creating a planetary display that is also a regulator. Now, you can see this is a crown-free watch, 41 millimeters in grade 5 titanium, feather light and highly scratch resistant. Let me show you how you tell the time here. I know I often describe how you use these watches, so if you're a regular, you're already ahead of the curve, but some folks might be new to Ressence and new to the show. Right now, we are looking at 2 p.m. How do we know it's 2 p.m.? Because you can see it's 2, the minutes hand is at 60, and then the day of the week, which moves in a clockwise direction, you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It is 2 p.m., just past the midsection of that small arc representing Wednesday, meaning it's just past noon. It is 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. You've got a seconds runner, which oddly is a 90-second display, but it lets you know the watch is running. And then you can see that lovely concentric satin finishing on the ruthenium coated dial, which is explosively loomed. Throw the watch on the wrist, it wears rather like a wire lug Rodimer, but smaller because it's a 41 millimeter watch. Extremely comfortable. This one features an unusual strap in a sort of suede, or I would say more accurately, a nubuck style leather. Seamless and bonded. You could see it transitions on the underside to a black calfskin with a contrasting stitch and a lovely Ressence manufacture buckle. I don't know if you could see, but the details matter here at Ressence. The little hand logo of the company is atop the pin within the pin buckle. Now, a timepiece. We're jumping across the border again. We went from Glashutte to Switzerland and back with a detour through Belgium, and now we're talking about what has to be described as the true flagship of modern German horology. As great as the work of Lange Söhne is, as great as the work of Moritz Grossmann and Glashütte Original can be, this is a watch that I believe represents the finest from the standard a Lange Söhne. This is the second generation 1815 Flyback chronograph. You have the Flyback chronograph capability that allows you to reset and restart with a single push of the trigger, blued alpha style hands, a sterling silver dial that is then galvanized this silver white color you see here. There is a chaptering outboard for railroad style minutes and seconds, and you can see the registers are sunken somewhat below the cannon pinion, just as they would be on a datograph, because they use the same basic movement. White gold here, the watch is 39.5 millimeters and right about 11 millimeters thick. Turn it all over, you can see that 60-hour manual wind power reserve caliber. Let me see, do my best right there. That is the L9515. Lateral clutch, column wheel. You could see how much of the metal on that movement is black polished. 60-hour power reserve, 5-position adjustment, black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism, hacking seconds, flyback capability, a fully jeweled lateral clutch with 5, maybe even 6 interior angles. This is a timepiece that exhausts the emotion, and you must own a fine loop if you own this watch. Hell, buy this watch and we'll throw one in. Graceful on the wrist, it is more, I would say, more of a purist's timepiece than the datograph, as it's considerably thinner. It has a handsome aspect ratio as it's not as chunky. It doesn't need to bear the power reserve indicator or the double-digit date of the dato. Technically identical in every other regard, this is a graceful timepiece that, as you can see, fits flush on the wrist, and with a sterling silver dial and a white gold case, it feels heavier than you'd expect for a sub 40 millimeter watch. It's a true treat. Now, at the end of this episode, I'm going to tell you which of these watches I would most like to own. And spoiler alert, it's going to be a Vacheron. This model doesn't show up nearly often enough, but if you're looking to get into luxury horology, I mean Geneva hallmark luxury horology, for under $15,000, you need to consider the Quai de Lille in stainless steel. This is a timepiece that came out in 2016, and immediately we all said that's what it should have been from its beginning in 2008. The original, which was festooned with odd and poorly balanced anti-counterfeiting graphics, never lived up to the promise of its handsome modular case and the substantial movements within. With this model, the simple 3-hand date from 2016, the watch came into its own. Now you can see the date on this watch is an orbital date. So it's a little triangular wedge, and you can see it orbits the date as you operate the quickset system, navigating the dial 1 circuit per month. Now, everything that is used for telling time, the hands as well as the indices, are applique 18 karat white gold. So it's that same high quality dial that you would expect in any other Vacheron. No compromise in material. We're not talking rhodium plated steel. You can see there are several different textures, tones, colors, and wonderful depth as the date track is sunken into the center of the dial. The watch features that handsome modular case construction that I mentioned from the earliest versions. You can see the side of the case is somewhat relieved, hollowed out and satin finished with polished beveling for contrast, and the lug profiles at the end have a little bit of a stacked architecture that's evocative of the best of early to mid-century Art Deco and modernism. The watch is 41 millimeters and cushion shaped, which in some regards is a little bit of a throwback, as the cushion case watch had its heyday during the 1920s. The watch is not terribly broad across the wrist, though it is a substantial timepiece. Remember, it's a 41, and at right around 50 millimeters lug to lug, it's highly viable. You can see how it's not overlapping the edge of my wrist, so it's a good match for a smaller wrist. Turn it all over. You have 60-hour manufacturer caliber 5100, 60-hour power reserve Geneva hallmark adjusted in 5 positions the way a luxury timepiece and many chronometers will be. This is everything you imagine. Côte de Genève, mirrored anglage, engine turned perlage on the base plate, black polished screws, and the closer you get, the more impressive it becomes. And again, when you can pick this up for under $15,000, $14,000, even $13,000, you're talking about getting the best in the world because we're not just talking about a Geneva hallmark movement. We are talking about a Geneva hallmark case construction, and I will show you the little Geneva hallmark on the case, because since 2012, there has been a Poinçon de Genève on the case as well. It is now a full watch test of fit finish materials, and this watch aces the exam. Now, if you don't quite have Vacheron money, but you want one of the best brands and you want an iconic model, they don't come more exalted than a Zenith El Primero caliber 410 complete calendar moon phase. Now, back in the day, this was born in 1969 as the El Primero 3019 PHF. It was the complete calendar version of the El Primero. 52-hour power reserve, 10 beats per second. Back in 1969, this was the world's first high-beat automatic integrated chronograph caliber. It features a crisp column wheel for operation. You feel it, you hear it. Let me see if I can get the column wheel visible. Now you can see the column wheel visible and in action on the case back of this watch. As crisp and solid as anything from Lange. In terms of pusher feel, it's right up there with Lange and Rolex as the best in the business. Now, the timepiece features a 42mm stainless steel case with a sunburst metallic dial, applique indices fully loomed. You'll appreciate the fact that the Chronomaster style case features the perfect blend of faceting, satin, polish, and curves. A graceful timepiece that wears well on the wrist. It's luxuriously equipped with a full deployant clasp and an alligator leather strap in dark brown that features a natural vulcanized rubber inlay on the bottom to isolate the wrist and the leather, so you never have to worry about the moisture, heat, sweat, and grit of the wrist aggressing against the leather and wearing it down. As a result, the strap can last for half a decade, and Zenith straps have incredible longevity. Not excessively broad on the wrist, it's a full-size men's complication, but it's neither sports watch nor dress watch. It's an all-arounder that excels at both. It has that lovely double-step cadence of a 10 beat per second movement. The El Primero, 51 years after it was born, remains the standard in the industry, both for feel, for sound, for heritage, for function, and precision. And this timepiece, one of the finest. Now, if you want to go high horology, we have some wonderful options, including a piece that might have the sexiest dial I have ever encountered of independent brand Laurent Ferrier of Geneva. They call this one the Red Wind. That's wind with an E. Now, as you can see, it is a lush, deep, lustrous, and almost wet-looking translucent lacquer. It is a lacquer that has a lovely gradient fade around the sub-register. You can see the minimalism of the dial with white gold assegai or spear-style hands at center. And then you could see the indices themselves, all three of them, white gold, tapered and polished. The watch, a 40mm white gold case. Throw it on the wrist. And it is called Galet because it is the image of a pebble smoothed over eons within a rushing stream or a babbling brook. As graceful as its name implies, the timepiece is even more appealing on its caseback. This caliber, featuring a 3-day power reserve, a 22-karat guilloche cut micro-rotor, a double direct impulse escapement inspired by the Breguet natural escapement that operates unlubricated, features 6-position adjustment, one more than a standard chronometer, and that double direct impulse escapement enhancing the precision as well as the power reserve 3 days for this watch. Now, it also features a free-sprung architecture and an overcoil hairspring, so this is an extraordinarily accurate timepiece, not just a showcase for fine finishing, but you could see those ridged Côte de Genève turning dark on one side as I angle them through the light, the sign of real abrasive wheel Côte de Genève not stamped. A black polished skeletonized half bridge for the balance. You could see 4 interior angles, a 5th interior angle over the center wheel, a lovely beveled and black polished, alternately satin and black polished bridge for the rotor. The rotor uses pawls and a jeweled staff for silent winding, and you'll note that the anglage is so fat it's gleaming underneath my finger with no need to resort to a loop. You can appreciate this movement without any kind of assistive optics. This is the kind of watch that is so beautifully finished and broadly beautiful that you don't need any kind of assistance to appreciate the full extent of what Laurent Ferrier hath wrought. That is a monster watch. By the way, I think I called that a 40, it's a 41. However, this truly is a 40mm watch. This was probably the most interesting 2016 debut to me because it's taken me nearly half a decade to see it, and it came absolutely out of left field back in 16. Back in 2K16, Chanel decided that it was going to appeal to men with a hardcore mechanical push, a movement designed with substantial input as well as fabrication from 2011 Chanel acquisition Romain Gaultier. If you notice the form of those wheels and they look familiar, that's because they come whence all of the great Gaultier watches, from the Logical 1 to the HM back in the 2000s. This is a watch that is designed with incredible design coherence and engineering excellence. 3-day manual wind power reserve, a free-sprung balance, and a full balance bridge for shock resistance. It features a 240-degree sweep. It is a retrograde jump hour, and it is very crisp. A 3-day power reserve, beaten away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, caliber 1 with 30 joules, a bolt-action rifle for your wrist. You'll note the octagonal form of the frame for the hour, which is echo in the form of the buckle itself, designed to evoke the cap of the Chanel No. 5 perfume bottle. You'll also note the Chanel lion inset within the logo on the buckle. Turn the watch over. Oh, this is good. Caliber 1, a blinding array of NAC nickel anthracite coating, silvered wheels, and note the star form of the balance. Note the full balance bridge. Note how everything is built on a recurring circular motif, and that artfully designed to coexist alongside the engineering, giving no quarter to either the demands of art nor science, but maxing both. You could see a handsome and thematically consistent design that speaks to a clean sheet effort derived from nothing and built entirely in-house with the assistance of Romain Gaultier. This watch is 40 millimeters, only 10 millimeters thick, 300 pieces made in what Chanel describes as beige gold, and it is that. It's somewhere between yellow and pink. It is beige. It is warm. It works well with any skin tone, and you can see how narrow it is across the wrist at under 48 millimeters, making it appropriate for wrists as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference and so low on the wrist. This is a watch that debuted in 2016 with a $36,000 retail price. It looks it, it feels it, it is worth it, but pre-owned is always better. And this is the coolest watch I have on the table today. However, it is not the one I would pick for myself. Back in 1999, Audemars Piguet started an epic, the first ever Royal Oak Offshore limited edition, and by many accounts, the best. Perhaps the greatest disparity ever between movie quality and branded watch quality. This is the 25770 End of Days. 500 pieces, all black PVD steel, released in conjunction with the movie End of Days, starring Audemars Piguet ambassador Arnold Schwarzenegger. The watch features an incredible murdered outlook punctuated only by the yellow shocks of the dial. Now, the watch features the old style Royal Oak Offshore strap adjustment. It features the hinge lugs rather than the double plots, fixed as ever using screw-fixed bars. You can see this case is immaculate. Not a scratch, not a scuff, not a solitary fraction of a millimeter worn through. This is, as they say, a blank slate. If you want a museum quality End of Days, if you want something that is unmarred by the ravages of years and perfectly represents the watch that shocked the world back in '99, this is it. And because of the way those hinge lugs work, this is actually the Royal Oak Offshore 42 millimeters that you want to wear if you have a small wrist. The plots on the newer watch, the intermediate links, extend the strap over the edges of my wrist, but with these hinge style lugs, I have no trouble wearing the watch with no overlap on the edge of my wrist. Inside, you have a soft iron anti-magnetic cage, a feature that was lost on the in-house versions of this watch. And that soft iron anti-magnetic cage surrounds a JLC 889 base movement, meaning this watch is high horology on the outside and high horology on the inside. Throw it on a rubber strap, AP still sells them, and the watch is also 100 meters water resistant. Well, I'm saving my best for last, and that is exactly what I've got right here. If I had to wear one watch for rough and tumble times, good and bad, it would be that iridescent dial Omega, the way to go with a daily driver that at the same time isn't a disposable watch. But when nothing but the best will do, There has to be something along the lines of a Vacheron in every man's collection, or at least a space within the heart for the Grail watch that this represents. Launched in 2000, this is the 47112 yellow gold Malte perpetual calendar chronograph. Look at the strength of these lugs. Less than 48 millimeters lug to lug, and I believe less than 47 millimeters lug to lug, fulfilling Vacheron Constantin's long-time styling ethic. Not a particular watch design or shape, but extravagant lugs that are big, bold, flamboyant, and sometimes even a little bit brash. And that's exactly what we have here in the tradition of the corne de vache, the claw lugs, the flame lugs. You have these enormous Malte-style lugs, beautifully broken from the case band. This is welded lug construction of the highest grade, a handmade case, and a handmade watch. On the dial, broadsword hands, half frosted over a solid yellow gold engraved moon phase disc, a perpetual calendar featuring the day and the month, the leap year phase, and a radial date indicator, a column wheel chronograph, smooth as butter. Exquisitely, this 39mm watch is equipped with a hunter-style caseback, black polished on its outside and spring loaded to allow you to see the Vacheron caliber 1141 QP, manual wind, 48-hour power reserve, 5-position adjustment, black polished column wheel and swan's neck fine adjustment, overcoil hairspring made by hand. And as you can see, I'll try to open this up as much as I can. A lateral clutch column wheel. It is based on the Lemania 2310 Bausch, which went to the moon as the Omega Caliber 321, meaning this is one of the all-time great movements used by Omega, used by Vacheron, used by Breguet, used by Patek, and many others in different grades of finish. What you're seeing here is the absolute highest grade of finish. Steel levers, horns, and clutch for the chronograph, satin on their top, beveled on their edge, Côte de Genève across the bridges, and every wheel satin finished across its top with chamfered spokes and inner circumference. Does it get any better? It does not. That's an open and shut case. Throw it on the wrist. And I have to admit, while I am not a colored gold kind of collector, I've seen this watch in platinum. I would prefer it in yellow gold. It has dash. It has panache. It has flair. It immediately plugs you in, electrical socket style, to the history of Vacheron Constantin. And not only is it illuminating, it is electrifying. A watch that's narrow across the wrist, bold in its form, but wearable in its size and proportions. This is the perfect watch. And for under $45,000 in a world where people are paying 70 grand for a 5711, please, somebody smack me and tell me that this watch isn't selling for... Never mind. You guys know that argument. You guys know that rant. Please, someone give this watch a warm and welcoming home. I rarely do this, but this watch has earned my affection in a way few ever do. I will miss you when you're gone. Guys, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, to start the purchase process or simply inquire about pricing, availability, conditions, and accessories for any watch you see here. I want to thank my crew for coming in on a tough day. They weren't scheduled to be here this day. I called them in out of turn. They are the true heroes. Thank you so much. I hope your weekend is a blast. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.